Let's take you to this leading story. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden has ordered flags across the nation to fly at half-mast after 21 people, including 19 children and 2 adults, were killed when a gunman opened fire at an elementary school in southern Texas yesterday. This latest gun massacre in the United States comes just 10 days after 10 people were killed in Buffalo, New York, in what authorities there are investigating as a hate crime. Texas Governor Greg Abbott called the shooting horrific and incomprehensible. The Pope and United Nations Secretary General expressed deep shock and sadness at what Antonio Guterres called a heinous mass shooting in Uvalde near San Antonio in Texas. All right, now let's get the latest. We now cross to our correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time. A devastating shooting. You know, as the names of those who were killed are being made public, you know, just the sheer horror of the shooting is still too hard to comprehend for many people, you know, as global leaders also continue to condemn this latest mass shooting. Give us the latest, Sherwin.
Yeah, parents dropping their children off at school where you think they are essentially in a safe haven, a safe space with their teachers, with their fellow pupils, and of course getting frantic calls or, you know, getting an alert from 911 or local authorities that the place at which you have just dropped off your child is now under attack. 21 victims, as we now know, 19 children, 2 adults. We believe that they both are teachers. And just to juxtapose what happened in Buffalo 10 days ago with the events unfolding in Uvalde, Texas, we knew very soon after the attack in Buffalo that this was done by a white supremacist. The police were able to tap into what was called a online manifesto, where it basically laid out his hatred for black people in the United States and therefore the targeting of that black community in Buffalo, New York. We don't know what the motive is for the 18-year-old Salvatore Ramos, the deceased suspect in this case, right? The suspect in Buffalo is alive, is in custody, he's being interviewed and interrogated by police. We don't get that sort of opportunity in this case in Uvalde, Texas. We understand that the deceased suspect first shot his grandmother at her home before fleeing the house. She is now, we're told, recovering in hospital. Fleeing the house, Unati, driving a vehicle with a rifle and handgun in this vehicle, landing in a ditch near the school. So we don't know if this was intentional or if he just happened to end up in this ditch by accident and then, by virtue of his location, then targeting the school, which led to 21 dead people, including these 19 children, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. You're talking about 6, 7, 8, 10-year-olds here. So the tragedy that is unfolding in this community of 15,000 people. We're told the deceased suspect, is known to many people in that very close-knit community, and a sense of outrage and despair across this country, given that this, of course, is not the first mass shooting to dominate the headlines here. The President of the United States, accompanied by First Lady Jill Biden, speaking last night at the White House. This is some of what he had to say. Watch.
When in God's name are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done? It's been 3,448 days, 10 years since I stood up at a high school in Connecticut, a grade school in Connecticut, where another gunman massacred 26 people, including 20 first graders at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, there have been over 900 incidents of gunfires reported on school grounds. Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Santa Fe High School in Texas. Oxford High School in Michigan. The list goes on, and the list grows when it includes mass shootings at places like movie theaters, houses of worship, as we saw just 10 days ago, at a grocery store in Buffalo, New York. I am sick and tired of it. We have to act.
And just to give you a sense, Unati, about how this is reverberating around the country, a friend of mine here in New York has a 6-year-old. He just turned 6-year-old. She posted a picture of her son at the gates of his school here in New York, and she writes the following: dropped my baby off at school. Sandy Hook, of course, referring to the attack on an elementary school in Connecticut 10 years ago. Sandy Hook enraged me. Now I have a child who's of a similar age to the babies killed in Texas. This country, speechless, is how she ends that post. So that just gives you a sense of how people are feeling around the country today.
Read up about just some of the things that are being said about this particular shooting. I mean, you mentioned the ages of those children. Many people saying they were just babies, they were just children. This has, of course, been described as the deadliest school shooting, just probably also because it happened at an elementary school. And I mean, I was listening to, just some of the outrage from people that are obviously, just shocked at what is happening and the sheer horror of it all. Steve Kerr, NBA coach, saying this has got to stop. We need to remove guns from people. Of course, the conversation then comes in, Sherwin, just how easily accessible are guns to the American, public. I mean, one hears of stories that gun shops are more prevalent than McDonald's shops, as an example.
To drink in the United States, alcohol, you need to be 21 years old. To buy a gun in the United States, you need to be 18 years old. And a lot of people start shooting, in rural parts of America. We can understand, kids grow up with guns. I mean, it's part of the culture in the United States, affirmed by the Second Amendment here, which makes gun ownership in this country legal. And it's a fundamental pillar and tenet of the United States Constitution. So, that's the context, that's the background. But what Democrats in the main have been trying now for a number of years, given the proliferation of guns in this country and the extent to which mass shootings happen on a regular basis in the United States, efforts have been made to restrict gun proliferation and the access to guns, doing common sense things like closing loopholes that allow people to purchase guns, weapons at gun shows, or online or in private sales without the requirement of a background check. Democrats, for example, in the House of Representatives passed two bills in March last year. I'll just tell you what some of those bills do, Unati. House Democrats passed these two bills that strengthen gun laws by closing loopholes and expanding background checks for gun purchases. One bill tightened background check rules to no longer allow a gun sale to proceed if a check is not completed within 3 days. So essentially the law as it stands says if the gun check, the background check is not completed in 3 days, the purchase can go ahead. What the bill has now done is to expand that period to 20 days before that purchase can go through. The other thing, the second thing that a bill does is it closes this gun show loophole, essentially, where if you're at a gun fair, a gun show, or if it's an online or private purchase, no background check is required. Common sense stuff that a majority of Americans support. These bills are sitting currently in the United States Senate. The problem there is that you need 60 votes to pass major legislation, and of course, Democrats only have a 50-50 split with Republicans. Essentially, they're in the majority because the Vice President Kamala Harris votes with a Senate Democrat. So that legislation cannot proceed in the Senate because Republicans, the 10 Republicans needed to pass that kind of legislation, have not come to the table. Chris Murphy, a senator that represents the state of Connecticut, where the Sandy Hook massacre happened 10 years ago, immediately, hours after this attack in Uvalde, took to the Senate floor. This is what he had to say.
There have been more mass shootings than days in the year. Our kids are living in fear every single time they set foot in a classroom because they think they're going to be next. What are we doing? Why do you spend all this time running for the United States Senate? Why do you go through all the hassle of getting this job, of putting yourself in a position of authority, if your answer is that as this slaughter increases, as our kids run for their lives, we do nothing? What are we doing? Why are you here? If not to solve a problem as existential as this. This isn't inevitable. These kids weren't unlucky. This only happens in this country and nowhere else. Nowhere else do little kids go to school thinking that they might be shot that day.
So emotional scenes from the senator from Connecticut, the Democratic senator. Just to give you a sense, Unati, of what Republicans are saying, Ted Cruz is the junior senator from Texas. He was interviewed shortly after this attack, and he said he called for more armed officers stationed at the schools. So his response to gun violence at schools and elementary schools is essentially more guns. So to have police officers or armed security guards stationed at these schools so that they can engage potential gun attackers. He said that gun control was not the solution, and that Democrats and the media are effectively trying to politicize an issue when essentially the Republican view is that more guns is the solution. A good guy with a gun is the response that is required to a bad guy with a gun. Unati.
Unbelievable. Sherwin, thank you so much for your time, that update, and that very comprehensive analysis. I really appreciate it.